the dark haze. Ladies of the night with eyes of red, vampires in the alleys where good men dread, wolfmen howling beneath the pale moon. But justice is coming and coming soon. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us. Secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. Cryptids themselves, yet they stand tall against the darkness, answering the call for every lost soul, every whispered prayer. They fight for the light in the midnight air. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us. Secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. The night is young, the hunt begins. For against the darkness where hope never ends.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Nightmare Hunter Podcast. In the studio tonight is just me and Robbie Jed Rains. Doc is traveling right now, not near a computer, and Steve is at work, so you just have to put up with us two eggheads tonight. Robbie, how the heck you doing, brother?
Running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to make sure I got everything ready.
Well, you and Doc are heading to the LBL this weekend, correct?
Yep, sure.
I was gonna be joining you, but it wasn't in the cards this time. Got too much going on, especially health wise, so I'm not gonna be able to make it this year, folks. But it is going to be a good time, and if you guys are in the area, you definitely need to go hang out with Doc and Robbie.
We'll be there. Look for the big land yacht, Mobile Command Center. He got a Suburban. This
Nice.
time.
So he's definitely going to have the big land yacht.
Yeah. I'm curious to see if he can do a J-turn on that like he did on that little Wagoneer.
You know, I would not put it past him.
Probably not. And I wouldn't put it past that. It might happen.
He'll channel his inner stroker race again and flip that thing around like it's nothing.
Oh, yeah. I talked to him earlier this morning, and he was going through, I think he was going through
Thank you,
Kansas.
Bobby. Mm-hmm.
And the wind was blowing. He said, this thing is no fun to drive on the interstate with the wind blowing. So if you're driving a land yacht, I guess so.
Yeah, that thing's massive. It's just it's a kind of irony thinking of little bitty Doc driving that great big old truck.
Yep. So
he probably had to sit in a booster seat and put blocks on his feet to drive.
yeah, he looks like Short Round out of Indiana Jones, probably.
That's just what I was hinting at. I knew I couldn't slip a movie reference past you.
Hey, I try.
Well, folks, before we jump into things tonight, there's a couple of things I want to do. First off, the thing I would like to do is there's some folks I'd like to ask y'all to take a moment and pray for tonight when you lay down and close your eyes. Pray for Harold Goodell. He's a longtime member of the channel, longtime friend of the channel. He's having eye surgery, and surgery's scary enough, but on your eye, It gives me the heebie-jeebies thinking about anything close to my eye, let alone having surgery on it. So, Laura, thank you for sponsoring the channel, and keep Miss Lene in your prayers, keep Harold in your prayers, keep prayers on Doc and Robbie as they're traveling to the LBL this weekend. Thank you, Billy. And, also favor all the good folks that are going to be at the Woodwalkers meet and greet, the Woodwalkers and everybody that's going to be there, so that they're safe and come home safe and everybody has a good time.
And for those
Thank you, Lisa.
Throw Misty in there because she's got some kind of help, because she's not going to be able to make it either. She's got some kind of health stuff going on too. So she just posted it on Facebook today that she's not going to be able to make it. So y'all pray for her too. I don't know exactly what it is, but she said it's serious enough where she's not going to make the meet and greet, and that's not
right. Well, then definitely pray for Misty as well. Well, there's one other thing. This is also kind of a prayer request, but I don't really want to say the name. I did this once before for Eric, but you guys all know Eric. This is a veteran friend of mine who's having a really rough go of it right now. I would never ask for something like this for myself, but I will for a friend. And not gonna say his name, but he's a U.S. Army veteran, and he's really struggling right now, both mentally and financially. And if you guys can't help, that's fine. If you can throw a buck or two, that's great. But if you can reach out and put something in his PayPal, that's his PayPal right there. CNH1980@AOL.com. $5, $10, whatever you can spare. I know he's going to appreciate it, and if you guys can help, please do. And I'll probably mention this again at the end of the show, but thank you guys, and thank you in advance. If anybody can send him anything, I know times are tough for all of us, but like Eric was in a bad spot, my friend's in a bad spot as well. So if y'all can, send him something if you can, and if you can't, I totally understand. But thank you, and now we're gonna get on with the show. Robbie, you ready to throw this thing?
Let's get it.
All right, tonight's episode is episode number 410, The Short-Faced Bear, Terror on the Tundra. These are true accounts of a Pleistocene predator that's still being seen today in North America. So I guess extinction is only a theory. There are places in the far north where the world just feels untouched by time. Places where the cold is not just a temperature, but a presence. Where the wind carries a low, ancient hum that feels older than language. Where the snow falls so deep and so clean that every track becomes a confession, and every shadow feels like a memory of something the land has not yet let go of. Alaska, the Yukon Territory, the Northwest Territories, these are wildernesses so vast that even now, with satellites overhead and digital maps in everybody's pocket, there are valleys where no human has ever walked, ridges where no boot has ever touched, canyons where the sun only reaches the ground for a few minutes each day, and in those places, the old stories still breathe. Stories whispered by trappers who spent their lives alone in the cold. Stories told by bush pilots who've seen things from the air that no one believes on the ground. Stories carried by indigenous elders whose ancestors watched the Ice Age end with their own eyes. Stories of something enormous, something powerful, and something that should not exist anymore. But maybe it does. A giant that once ruled this continent, the short-faced bear. In its day, well, even by today's standards, it would be the largest living land predator on the planet. Arctodus simus, a towering predator of the Pleistocene, a creature so large it could look a person in the eye while standing on all fours. A creature built not for lumbering but for speed. A pursuit hunter with legs like pillars and a skull designed to crush bone like dry twigs. Science tells us that it vanished 12,000 years ago, which, as we all know, when it comes to evolution, 12,000 years is a tick of the clock. Science tells us that it's gone. Science tells us that the Ice Age took it. But the land, well, that tells a different story. Because across the north, people are still seeing something. Tracks too big for any modern bear. Stride patterns that don't match grizzlies or polar bears. Kills that show crushing force instead of tearing. shadows that move with a long, confident gait, and encounters where seasoned hunters, men and women who know every inch of that area, come home shaken, pale, and unwilling to return to the place where they saw it. There are pilots who have watched something massive running across frozen rivers. There are snowmobiles who've been chased by something that moved like a freight train on legs. There are hikers who've seen a silhouette on a ridge that stood too tall, too straight, and too still. There are wildlife officers who have found carcasses torn apart with a power no modern predator can match. And then there are the stories, quiet stories, private stories, of people who felt watched by something but they never saw it. Tonight, we're going to walk into that cold. We're going to follow those tracks, folks. We're going to listen to the people who've seen the impossible. And we're going to ask the question that science refuses to touch. What if the short-faced bear never died out? What if it survived the Ice Age? And what if it adapted? What if it learned to avoid us? What if the greatest predator in North American history is still out there, walking the tundra, moving through the timber, and hunting in the deep valleys where no man goes? This is not folklore. This is not cryptid fantasy. This is not a campfire story. This is a pattern stretching across decades, across borders, and across cultures. A pattern that points to one chilling possibility, that extinction may only be a theory. Tonight we break down the biology, the sightings, the evidence, and the encounters that suggest a relic population of Arctodus simus may still roam the last true wilderness on the continent. This is episode 410. This is the Terror on the Tundra, and this is the Nightmare Hunters. If you're joining us out here in the cold, do us a favor. Like the episode, share it with someone who loves the deep wilderness, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to support the show directly, consider becoming a channel member. It helps us keep the lights on, keep the research going, and keep the hunt alive. Now, let's step into the snow, shall we? Robbie, take her away.
Segment 1, the tracks at Windfall Lake. The story goes in the winter of 1988, when the winter of 1988 hit the interior of Alaska with this kind of force only nature can deliver. 3 days of heavy snow, thick, wet flakes that swallowed the world and buried every trail, every scent, every sign of life. When the storm finally broke, the land lay under a clean white sheet, untouched and silent. For a trapper like Henry Caskin, this was the best kind of morning. Fresh snow meant fresh truth. No old tracks, no confusion, just a blank canvas waiting to be read. Henry had been running trap lines for more than 30 years. He wasn't a man who guessed. He wasn't a man who exaggerated. He was the kind of woodsman who could tell you the age, weight, and direction of an animal just by the way the snow compressed under its feet.
You can do that, can't you?
Mm-hmm. Probably not as good as him, but I know the basic general principles behind it.
Okay, well, I know. All I know is when it comes to tracking, you blow my skills out of the water. I thought I was pretty good until I met you. Then I was like, God dang! Realized how little I actually knew.
Tracking is just one of those things that anybody can do it, but it takes practice to get. And somebody like this guy, who's out there every day reading that. I mean, that's real world skill that you can't put a price on that.
Kind of like writing. It's one of those skills you get better as you practice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like something I remember telling somebody not too long ago.
Yeah, you did several times. So, the morning was cold and sharp enough to sting the inside of the nose. The sky was pale and washed out blue. The kind of morning where sound doesn't travel too far, where even the wind seems to move carefully. Henry followed the line toward Windfall Lake, a place that he knew well is his own backyard. The snow was perfect, smooth, untouched, a clean slate. About an hour into his route, he saw it. A single track, deep, wide, and sharp. At first glance, it looked like a bear print, a big one. But as he knelt beside it, something just didn't add up to him. The toes were spaced too far apart, the pad was too broad, and the depth was just wrong. Far too deep for the snow conditions, far too deep for any bear he'd ever tracked. Henry brushed away the loose snow, exposing the full outline. The print was enormous, bigger than any grizzly he'd ever seen before, bigger than any bear he'd ever seen in the region for that matter. He stood slowly scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, no sound, just the cold, steady quiet of the north. He followed the tracks. The stride was long. It was longer than any bear could manage or should be able to manage. A grizzly's gait is heavy, rolling, almost clumsy in deep snow. The creature walked with a long, even stride, the kind you see in animals built for covering ground quickly. The tracks cut through drifts without hesitation, and then moved across uneven terrain without breaking rhythm. And then they reached a frozen creek. Henry stopped at the edge, staring. The ice was thick, but not thick enough for something that heavy. A grizzly would have cracked it. A grizzly would have cracked it. A moose would have punched through, but the tracks crossed the creek cleanly, without a single fracture in the ice. Whatever made these prints walked across with confidence, or with an understanding of where the ice is strongest. Henry crossed carefully, following the trail and up a small rise. The tracks continued with the same long, deliberate strides. No wandering, no hesitation, no sign of fear or caution. And then the trail led into a narrow ravine. The walls rose steeply on either side. The shadows were deep, and the air felt colder there, the way it does in places where sunlight rarely reaches. Henry stepped forward, scanning the snow, and then he froze. The tracks stopped. Not turned, not doubled back, not scattered, but stopped. The last print was crisp and perfect, the edges sharp as if it had been made just minutes before. And beyond it, nothing, just untouched snow stretching into the ravine. Henry stood there for a long moment trying to make sense of it. There was no wind to cover the tracks, no snowfall, no sign of a jump, a scramble, or a climb. Just a clean end to a trail that should have continued. He backed away slowly, not because he felt watched, not because of anything supernatural, but because the situation didn't make sense. And in the wilderness, things that don't make sense are dangerous. When he returned home, he told his wife he wouldn't go back to that ravine. He said the tracks were too big, too clean, and too perfect. He said they reminded him of something he had seen once in a museum, a towering skeleton of a bear that should not exist anymore, a short-faced bear. And that was all he ever said about it. Yeah, I believe I would have backed out of that ravine too.
Yeah. Well, did you see how big that dang track was?
Well, if it's bigger than, a grizzly or a polar bear track, then that means it's massive.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
so, I know you're a trained tracker, but this guy had literally decades of tracking experience.
Yeah. Which, you know this, all the classes in the world don't mean nothing compared to somebody who's been out there doing it for 30 years, learning how to read.
Exactly.
Because we had a guy who used to work with us, worked for DNR for the first 30 years of his career, and that's the way Brian was. He was out there all day, every day in the woods. That joker he'd walk outside and look up and say, yep, it's about to rain in 15 minutes. And 14 minutes and 59 seconds later, it'd be raining. I mean, you just, when you're out there in that every day, living that, and your life depends on how you read signs of animals and weather and all that kind of stuff, you get good at it.
Toshi, I'm right there with you. When he's just reading that, I'm like, he's going to turn around. That stupid bear's right behind him.
Well, I mean, that would be a very plausible thing.
That would have been a story we never really would have heard.
Yeah,
he'd have turned around, and that would have been the end of the story.
But yeah.
Well, and also with a paw that big, that would change its weight distribution for crossing that ice.
Well, and the pads on a bear's paw, especially ones like polar bears and things like that, they're made for living in conditions like that. They're made to disperse their weight because of that. I mean, think about how polar bears crossing ice floes and hunting on ice floes and things like that. That's what they're made for. So if this bear lived in that environment just like polar bears did, then it stands to reason that it had the same kind of features that polar bears do. So,
So why do you think the tracks just disappeared?
I knew you was gonna ask that, and I still ain't ready for it. Honestly, I don't know. I mean,
you're sure there could be like differences in like the terrain, wind funnels, snowdrift patterns, but for them to just end abruptly like that, that's kind of weird.
And that would have been, had it not gone into making a point of saying there was no wind in that ravine, that would have been my first guess. Is just there's a big wind gust was coming through there, and it may have took the first 4 or 5 prints from that last one and covered them up, and he just couldn't see the rest of the trail. And that still could have been what it was. Just because there wasn't no wind at the time he was standing there doesn't mean that there wasn't wind that came through right before he came up to that ravine. Because you know as well as I do that ravines like that become a funnel for wind. So a big gust of wind could have come through there and swirled around through there and took away some of those tracks. Just trying to throw some type of reason on it, some naturally occurring reason. That's how I would say that it probably happened. Or it could have been something, it was wind come across the top of the ravine and blew snow down from the top of the ravine and covered it in that way. That's possible too. I don't think
it could have been possible it could have climbed.
Oh, I'm sure it could have been.
Because a bear that big, they were saying that the average short-faced bear was around 14 feet tall, but they found fossil record specimens as much as 19 feet tall, which means they could theoretically be even bigger than that. Because when you're looking at fossil records, people, we're talking about less than 0.1% ever of animals that have perished ever become fossils. 0.1%. That means 99.9% of all animals that ever lived never left a fossil.
Yeah, so that's entirely possible.
An animal that big, if it stood up, it could put its paws up probably 18 feet. That ballpark, 18 to 20 feet, grab hold of a rock and pull itself up. Of course, that might have left scuff marks on the rocks, but maybe it didn't.
Well, and there again, you could have a factor of that, plus maybe a sudden gust of wind. And when you got that thick of a snow cover, and wind hits it, it's going to blow it, and it's going to fall, and cover in things like that. So things like that can disappear pretty quick in an environment like that. It's just like a really, like the desert, real sandy area. Trackway will actually shift to the side because of the wind blow. It'll actually blow the tracks. So you'll have a track going straight, and all of a sudden you have 4 or 5 tracks that are exact same stride length and everything, but they're, instead of in line, they're offline, 4 or 5 inches or more.
Like how in the Mojave, how they found where the wind has blown rocks for miles across the sand.
Yeah.
It's weird how atmospheric effects like that how they happen.
But that doesn't mean that it's any less weird that there's just that one track that just stops and nothing else. But there are naturally occurring things in nature that could explain it. Do I know exactly which one is? No, I don't. None of us do. But there are naturally occurring things that can cause that.
Lone Queen says, wonder if there were some hard surfaces that the man couldn't see that the bear used to move. Entirely possible. It could have reached up and hooked a tree branch. It's 12, 15 feet up, pulled itself up, and been gone.
And too, he said the track,
or it could have backtracked on its tracks, and because we know bears can do it.
Very well, but even though he said it looked like the track was minutes old, that doesn't necessarily mean that the track was minutes old.
Right.
It could have been, 20, 30 minutes old, and no telling what kind of weather come through there before he got across that creek and got up to that ravine. It
was like that track we found in the mud down at Joe Bald. It was very crisp. The edges were perfectly crisp, but there was no way it was minutes old. That had to have been at least a day.
Oh, yeah. It just, nature's finicky that way. Sometimes things can last a long time. Sometimes they don't last, but, a couple minutes.
Well, we do know animals can backtrack on their tracks. Bears do it. Rabbits do it. There's lots of documented cases. Our special forces are taught how to do it. So it's entirely possible that while he was following those crisp tracks, it backed up, found a rock, and took off. or went up a tree. Bears that big can still climb.
So, like I said, it is strange. It's I can understand why it unnerved him and made him want to back out. It's probably the smart thing to do. So, but as to exactly what caused it, it could have been a lot of different things. I tend to think it's probably more like what we said, that it probably went up that ravine, like there's maybe some rocks or something that he didn't see, like what Long Queen was talking about, some hard surfaces, and they just got covered over. Because any strong, and it doesn't have to be a sustained windstorm to do that. It could be just a strong gust of wind is all it needs to hit right in the right place for that track to be gone.
And like you're saying, up on top of that ridge there with the ravine above the ravine, it could have been blowing snow off into the ravine. So there's lots of explanations that why the tracks would disappear without going into anything too terribly crazy. But that you want to lead us into the second one?
Yeah. So if Henry's encounter stood alone, we could chalk it up to a misread track or an unusual snow conditions, but it doesn't stand alone. Not even close. Because across Alaska and the Yukon, people have been finding kills that don't match any modern predator. The next story begins with one of those kills. A moose carcass torn apart with a force no grizzly could match. DA, take it away.
This is the biology of a giant. The skeleton in Fairbanks. In 2003, a wildlife biologist named Dr. Lena Hart was working at a small natural history museum in Fairbanks. Wasn't a glamorous job. Most days were just spent cataloging specimens, updating displays, and answering questions from school groups. But the museum had one thing that always stopped visitors in their tracks. They had a full skeleton of Arctodus simus, the short-faced bear. It stood in the center of the main hall, towering over everything else. Long legs, massive shoulders, a skull shaped like a blunt wedge of bone and muscle. Even stripped down to skeleton, it still radiated power. Dr. Hart had walked past that skeleton 100 times, but one morning while waiting for a delivery of preserved specimens, she stopped, really stopped, and looked at it. She circled the skeleton slowly, studying the proportions. The legs were longer than any modern bear. The femur alone was nearly the length of her arm. The tibia was built for leverage, not bulk. The pelvis was narrow, almost cat-like, and the rib cage was deep and wide, built to house enormous lungs. She crouched beside the hind limb, tracing the line of the bone with her eyes. This wasn't the build of a lumbering scavenger. This was the build of an animal designed to run. She stood and moved to the skull. The jaws were massive. The sagittal crest, the ridge where the jaw muscles anchor, was enormous. The teeth weren't shaped for slicing like a big cat's. They were shaped for crushing. She whispered to herself, this thing wasn't slow. Later that day, she pulled old research papers from the archives, studies on limb proportions, stride length, muscle attachment points, energy expenditure models. The more she read, the more the picture started to sharpen. Arctodus simus wasn't a sluggish giant. It wasn't a scavenger stealing kills from smaller predators. It was a pursuit predator, a long-distance runner built to chase prey across open ground. She ran calculations, stride length, estimated speed, weight distribution, center of gravity, all of it. The numbers were staggering. A modern grizzly can sprint at up to 35 miles an hour, but only for a short burst. Arctodus simus, based on limb proportions alone, could likely maintain higher speeds for longer distances. We're not talking cheetah fast, but fast enough to run down big prey in the open terrain. She sat back in her chair, staring at the skeleton across the hall. If anything from the Ice Age could survive into the modern era, she said quietly, it would be this. She didn't publish that thought, not because she doubted it, but because she knew how the scientific community would react. Relic megafauna survival is a taboo subject, career-ending in some circles. But she kept a file labeled relic candidates, and at the top of the list was one name, Arctodus simus. Over the next few years, Dr. Hart quietly collected reports, oversized tracks, unusual kills, sightings from pilots and trappers. She didn't treat them as proof, she treated them as data points, patterns, clusters, anomalies, and one thing stood out. Every credible report came from the same regions: the deep interior of Alaska, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. Places with enough land, enough prey, and enough isolation to hide a small population of relic predators. She never claimed the short-faced bear was alive. She never said it publicly, but she did say this: if it survived, it would be the perfect ghost. Too smart to be seen often, too fast to be tracked easily, and too powerful to leave survivors. And then she added one more line: extinction is not a conclusion. It's not a guarantee.
So I guess one of the big questions is, why was Arctodus simus built for speed and not lumbering movements like a lot of bears are today?
Yeah, if you watch a grizzly bear run, it's rather ungainly. Yeah, they're quick over short distances. You know, we dwarves are natural sprinters, very dangerous over short distances. But yeah, they're not designed to run, you know, long distances. But when they do run, they're like they do not look graceful at all when they run. I get the feeling this thing was actually rather graceful as it ran. Longer legs, built for speed, very different build.
Yeah, and she was right. The longer limbs do suggest pursuit predator type stuff, and that's, they kind of changed that thinking on the T-Rex. They used to call it a scavenger, and they started doing that same kind of scientific work on it and looking at the limbs and all that stuff. And they've actually now started saying that they think T-Rex was a pursuit predator built for running.
Makes sense.
Down. So,
sorry, I'm doing something.
So things like the significance of the pelvis and the longer legs, like we said, that all lends towards something that's a fast moving predator, not something that's built for scavenging, or it's built to run things down, catch it, and kill it.
Bryce Edwards says, DA, do you think this could be what people are calling a gugway? Now, that's an interesting question. I had a conversation with William Nighthawk one time, and he postulated that the Lakota legend of what they call the Bear Man might be the explanation for a gugway. And I kind of wonder if a short-faced bear might be what they call a bear man, because it's shorter snouted. It stood up a lot. I'm wondering if some of the Native American legends, like the Bear Man legend, might be relics of the short-faced bear. But while I say it could explain it, I don't think it fully explains it, because there have been gugway sightings in East Texas and Arkansas. So I don't think the short-faced bear would make it that far, not without being seen.
That's what I'd say.
It's a big predator.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about something that's the size of bigger than this big SUV Suburban that Doc's driving in. I mean, this thing's huge.
We're talking an animal probably weighs in the ballpark of 2,000 pounds.
Oh, easy. So,
and Josh Dalton, he says, I think if they're out there, they could definitely be preying on steppe bison, because those are still up there. I mean, that's a known species. Plus, there's plenty of moose, elk, antelope, mountain goats. There are tons of big prey species up there that would keep something like that fed.
And the fact, like we said, that something that big could exist up there and stay hidden, but if it started moving down to the lower 48, it's going to be a lot harder. I mean, even though we've said that about how much land there is and how much something like that.
Well, look at Canada as a great example of why they're not this far south. 90% of Canada's population is within 100 miles of the border in this narrow band that basically follows the contour of northern United States. And when you get north of that, the population gets scarcer and scarcer. Why would they need to come south?
They would.
They're a cold weather predator. There are millions upon millions of acres of unbroken forest up there with no roads through it at all. Or if there is, it's a remote settlement or a fire watch station somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. But a lot of the reports that we're getting are from people that live in those remote areas. So, it's got its own ecosystem up there. Why would it need to come south?
Yeah, I mean, unless you get a situation where they're starting to lose prey species up there and they have to move, but as long as there's a steady food source up there, they're not going to have to.
Yeah, Arkansas. Yeah, I would agree. The information I was reading about them that said that they were pretty big. They were on average they were bigger than a polar bear on average, and they had specimens that were even bigger than that. So look at how often we find just this unexplainable group of animals that are much bigger than their contemporaries. A great example is come to southwest Missouri and look at the deer, and then go to northern Missouri along the Iowa border and look at the size difference. They're both whitetail, but the ones that feed on corn mostly up by the Iowa border, they're twice the size of the deer around here. They're huge, and it's the same species. It's just their diet that's allowed them to grow so much bigger. So if they've got a steady diet and you've got a big boar that's in charge of an area, why couldn't he be 15, 16, 18 feet tall?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's in that range, then if it's in that range, we're talking 2,500 pounds or more. Heck, there was how long ago was it that grizzly bear in Denali was shot? We were talking about, Robbie, the 14-footer.
3 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it still had the hiker in his belly with the 38 caliber pistol. Yeah, it was 3 or 4 years ago that a hiker went missing, and they ended up killing a 14-foot grizzly bear in Denali.
And that's a big specimen for a grizzly
monster of a grizzly bear. So if a grizzly bear could get that big, short-faced bear, they're just naturally bigger than grizzlies. Yeah, if a grizzly can get to 14, I bet they could get to 20. I'm not saying every case. I'm saying outliers. There will be outliers. There's a reason they call it average, because there's going to be some above it and some below it. Papa Bear says, so if they're moving south, could it be another predator moving in? It would take a massive predator to force them south. So if we started seeing short-faced bears like in Montana, there's something big up there making them come south. Or the other possibility is their population's exploding. Because really, you're talking about a bear the weight of a minivan. What's going to hunt it? I mean, in its day during the Pleistocene, it was the single largest land predator on the planet. It was the only things bigger were dinosaurs, and that was long before then. So it's the largest mammal predator, land predator of all time, basically.
And Bryce, I don't know that I wouldn't want to.
If they're hunting as a team, yeah, they could take one down.
I wouldn't want to
one-on-one. I think I put my money on the bear. Miss Lynn, no, Don says, or they ate everything north.
I mean, honestly, because this is what you would classify as a super predator.
Oh, definitely.
Which means super predator, apex predator, whatever you want to call it. That means there's nothing above it in the food chain. Now, there might be some things that can kind of get close to it, but there's nothing above it. There's nothing that's gonna, this is kind of like when people start talking about orcas versus great whites. Great whites are top of the food chain, but killer whales are above them. That's why, Hans Bay, South Africa almost went belly up, pun intended, when those killer whales come in and started feeding on great whites, pushed them out, and Hans, that Hans Bay depends on shark or cage diving.
Oh yeah, that's their bread and butter.
Yeah. So when those 2 killer whales started pushing that, and that was 2 whales that pushed an entire population of great whites out of an area. So if 2 killer whales can do that, if there's theoretically a population of these short-faced bears, what would it take? And it ain't going to take 1 or 2 Genosqua are not going to push out a population of short-faced bears.
It would take something
population for population.
Incredible.
I mean, population for population. If there's a thriving population of both, I don't think, maybe there's a competition for food, but at that point you would have both of them moving because they would both eat all the food that was up there.
Northwoods is on the board.
I figured.
That's funny. Cole, we will be getting to that. We will definitely be talking about that. So here's the thing. Would it be omnivorous like grizzlies and black bears? Because grizzlies they eat more meat than they do other stuff, but they'll eat roots and berries and honey and whatever else they come across.
But that goes back to what we've talked about before, is the further north you get, polar bears are not omnivores. Polar bears are strictly carnivores. I would think this thing would strictly be carnivorous.
Oh yeah.
And the only reason grizzlies are not strictly carnivores is because they live in between those climates, so they can eat. Now, you give a grizzly bear a choice, I believe it's probably going to take meat over that. But when it gets to the point where it's coming to time to get ready to start putting on weight for hibernation, that's when they start eating everything, just to pack those calories on.
It's kind of like taking me to a buffet. There's a salad bar and there's the steak bar. Where do you think I'm going?
Same place I'm going, steak bar. But so the further north you get, I mean, it's not a lot of green up there anyway.
Well, that scientist was saying that the skull was designed for crushing force, which isn't always a bear's motif. I mean, bears will take down prey, but it's not necessarily the crushing force. It's usually claw damage and them pinning something down and killing it. But for it to be like the reports of them crushing the spines of moose, that's an incredible bite force.
Think about what they were hunting when they were really prevalent. They were hunting really big things, so crushing was probably a needed asset because you didn't.
They were hunting like mastodons and things like that. Woolly rhinos.
Yeah, you needed to put something down, put it down quick. And if you had that crushing power and you could, get a hold of something by the back of the neck and crush its spine in one bite, that's less energy expenditure that you got to worry about.
K. Bowers, you know what, brother? It'd be like an Econoline van lumbering after you through the woods, although it's moving quick. So, and let's just spitball. How big? That's a big area up there between the Yukon territory, the Northwest Territory, and the center portion of Alaska. We're probably talking 100 million square acres, probably somewhere in that ballpark. That's a huge area. What do you think would be the size of the population up there? How many do you think that area could support?
Well, let's say this is they're, like you said, spitballing. I don't know that I'm going to assume that they're just like polar bears and grizzlies and Kodiaks and things like that, that the males are loners and the females stay with the cubs. So you're going to have a dominant male that's going to carve out his own section of territory. And then you're going to have females that wander in and out of those territories. And that's how if they work the same way as grizzlies and polar bears and things like that. So if that's the scenario and that's the case we're going with, I would say you probably could easily have, a population of 1,000 or more specimens, easy.
And especially if they maintain low breeding numbers.
Yeah, and because that's the same thing. I mean, think about how long a grizzly takes to reach maturity, or a polar bear takes to reach maturity.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have, they're not going to be ready to breed in 6 months like a pig. It's going to take years before a female is ready to reach breeding age. So I'd say a couple thousand would be a good safe
Pretty
estimate.
easy number.
Yeah, and that
across an area that big, actually, that might actually be a generously low number.
And it may be. I'm like you said, we're spitballing. I'm just saying, given how fast or how slow, rather, I would think that they probably mature. That's a safe number that I would say. I mean, it could be way more than that.
Lead laced, that's a very interesting question. One I would never answer, because if I was glassing a field and I saw one of those big son of a guns coming my direction, you can bet I'm going to, as Doc would say, unask the AO in a heck of a hurry. I'm not going to shoot it. I'm not going to try it. The only way I would is if it was it's shoot it or get ate.
And yes, 338 Lapua is a very good round to have, and that's a round I would not mind having if I had one of those things coming at me. But like DA said, I don't want to be in that situation to try to find out.
If you've got a 1911 on your hip and that's all you've got, if you got one in the chamber, I would shoot it 7 times, because that 8th one's for me. Yeah, that would be a much kinder death than being crushed to death by a 2,000-pound bear. Whew. That's the thought of one of those things come barreling towards you in the woods. I think it sounds like a freight train coming at you.
Oh yeah, you'd hear the sound of breaking trees long before you saw the bear.
Yeah,
it was coming at you.
But if you look at Alaska alone, the vast, deep interior of Alaska, it's easy to think a relic population could exist up there. We're talking about the state of Alaska. You could spread their entire citizenry out and put one person every square mile, and you wouldn't fill it. If you took literally every person in Alaska and spread them out a mile apart from each other, they still wouldn't fill the state.
Well, what'd you say? If you could explore 1 square mile a day, it'd take you 100 years?
125 years.
125 years
to explore 1 square mile a day. If you could literally explore 1 square mile, and any of you who've spent any time on the ground knows a square mile is a lot of territory to cover. So if you're covering a square mile a day, you're not covering it well. You're just going through it. But if you cover 1 square mile a day, it would still take you 125 years to cover all of Alaska.
So yeah, it's possible that something like that could still be alive up there, and nobody is.
Roxanne, the lifespan of a short-faced bear is kind of anybody's guess. I would guess it would be similar to a grizzly, which I'm not sure what the lifespan of a grizzly is. Let me consult the Googles.
Probably 25, 30 years.
20 to 25 years. So even if we guessed a little low, 15 to 20 years, that's still a long time to have a super predator operating in your area. Oh, she says how wide is the mouth span, not the lifespan. Let me bring up a couple of pictures. Give me just a second. I should have had these ready, but I was not thinking.
I would venture to say big enough that your head would get lost inside of it.
Oh yeah, I'd probably take your head off with a single bite. What pictures?
What was that? That was a Kodiak that you got that picture of me and Doc with in front of.
Yeah, that was definitely a Kodiak.
And if you still had that picture, you could, because this thing is bigger than that bear.
I still have that picture, but I don't know where it's at. God dang it! Did I not save those pictures? Give me just a second. I'm gonna have to find them again. Let me bring this image up. Gotta move it to a different screen.
Good point, William.
All right, this is a short-faced bear compared to people, and this is an average size bear. It is not the biggest one ever found. If you said that those guys were roughly 6 feet tall, taking into account the base that it's standing on, I think it'd still probably be 14 feet tall.
Oh, its arms are longer than either one of those guys are tall.
Well, they've got that standing on that little pedestal, but if they put them up next to it on the same height, judging those guys to be 6 feet, that would mean the 6 foot mark would probably be about that thing's elbow.
Well,
easily 12 feet. Definitely at least 12 feet.
Yeah, that's not something that you want to.
And you can take a look at the mouth on that thing. It could easily put one of these dudes' his entire head in its mouth. Let me see if I can find a short-faced bear comparison.
Northwood says that's almost twice the size of the polar bear mount they got in Juneau, Alaska Airport.
Here's a good one for you. You open this one. You ready for this one? Imagine you're walking down a trail out in the woods, and you round a corner and run into this.
Can we say brown pants moment?
Well, if you look at the where the shoulder is on this thing, that means its front leg is probably, what is that, 4.5 feet? Just one leg?
I'd say 4.5 if it's an inch. Because he's kind of slouched and that leg's bent, so you got to give him another 1.5 to 2 inches on that one.
That is a big old bear. Jake Light says the short-faced bear fossil or skeletal remains have been found all the way down in Mexico. Yeah, they've been found all over the U.S. They found several complete skeletons near the La Brea tar pits in L.A. 2 minutes till ad time. Thank you for the heads up, Miss Lene. Yeah, we actually got about a minute. So, folks, this would be a great time for y'all to top off your coffee, stretch your legs, let the dog out. Whatever you need to do, we're going to take a quick pause to pay the bills, as Race likes to say. So we will be right back after a brief message from our sponsors. So we will see you guys in just a minute.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com. 2026 is off to a great start, and it's almost time. With many exciting predictions and the recent emphasis on a potential major planetary event occurring in April, it promises to be a super transformational month. And we couldn't be more excited to be in Hawaii during this shift to integrate new frequencies. Folks, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. April the 20th through the 24th, 2026. Join us in Kona, Hawaii for Journey to Truth's very first vacation conference retreat. Enjoy 9 presenters over 5 days with ocean adventures with dolphins and whales and sacred sites and so much more. Experience Hawaii like never before. You will enjoy 5 days on the Big Island, so don't wait. Start planning your trip today at journeytotruth.online. That's journeytotruth.online. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man, from the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the Dead Rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and man's marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of D.A. Roberts.
And we are back, folks. Thank you guys for sticking with us. Had some new commercials this time. Race loaded us up. So I hope you guys check those out. Hope you enjoy them. And, definitely check out some of those books, mine included, and Robbie's, and Lucas, and Doc's. Don't forget Doc's. But we're going to jump right back into this. So if the biology makes survival possible, then the sightings become more than stories. They become data. And across Alaska and Canada, there are encounters that match the size, the speed, and the behavior of a predator built like Arctodus simus. The next segment takes us into 5 of those encounters, each separated by decades, but all describing the same impossible animal. Robbie, you want to take her away?
Segment 3, 5 encounters from the north. The Nahanni Valley Shadow. The Nahanni Valley is in Canada. Northwest Territory is one of the most remote regions on the continent. A place of deep canyons, boiling hot springs, and weather that can turn violent without a warning. Bush pilots call it the land that makes its own rules. Hunters call it the place where things disappear. In the summer of 1972, 2 bush pilots, both veterans of northern flying, were ferrying supplies to a remote research camp. The weather was clear, and visibility was perfect. The kind of day pilots just dream about. As they followed the curve of the valley, the co-pilot leaned forward, squinting at the frozen river below. Do you see that? The pilot dipped the wing slightly. Something enormous was running along the ice. First, they thought it was a moose, but the The movement was wrong. It was too smooth, too fast, and too deliberate. The animal ran with a long, powerful stride, covering ground at a speed no bear should manage. Its shoulders rose high, higher than a moose's hump, and its head was massive, blocky, and unmistakably ursine. And then for several strides, it rose onto its hind legs, not in display, not in a defensive posture, just running. The pilot circled back, but the animal had already vanished into the timber. What remained were the tracks, enormous, evenly spaced, and deep enough to show through the ice crust. The co-pilot refused to get out of the plane to measure them. He later said, "Whatever that was, it wasn't a grizzly, and it wasn't afraid of us. This was the first encounter, but it wasn't the last." The second encounter, the Kodiak Giant, in 1999. In 1999, two hunters on Kodiak Island were glassing a distant hillside when they saw a bear moving through the brush. Kodiak bears are already the largest brown bears on Earth. This one dwarfed them. The head was the size of a truck tire. The shoulders rose like moving boulders. And the speed was all wrong. It covered 100 yards of uneven ground in seconds. Not sprinting, just moving along with efficient strides. Or moving with long, efficient strides. When the hunters reached the area later, they found claw marks 18 feet up on a spruce trunk, higher than any Kodiak bear typically reaches. They reported it to the wildlife officials, and the officials dismissed it as an unusually a large specimen. The hunters didn't buy that. The third encounter, the Yukon River pursuit in 2004. A snowmobiler traveling along the Yukon River in 2004 reported being chased by something massive. He first noticed it when he saw movement in his peripheral vision, a large shape pacing him in the tree line. When he accelerated, it accelerated. When he slowed, it slowed. Then it broke from the trees. He described it as a freight train on legs, huge, fast, closing the distance. He pushed the snowmobile to its limit and didn't look back until he reached the fishing camp miles away. The next day, he and two others returned to the spot. They found tracks, deep, wide, nearly 18 inches long. Too big for a grizzly, too long of a stride, and too heavy of a print. Snowmobiler never traveled that stretch alone again. Me either. The fourth encounter, the Cairncross Ridge Silhouette in 2011. In 2011, two hikers in Cairncross, Yukon, were making their way down the ridge at sunset. The light was low, and the sky was turning gold behind the mountains. One of them stopped suddenly. On the opposite ridge stood a massive bear, but something was off. The legs were just too long, and the shoulders were too high. The muzzle was too short and blunt. The proportions didn't match any bear they knew. It stood still for nearly a minute, watching them. Then it turned and moved into the timber with a speed that didn't match its size. The hikers reported to local authorities, and they were told it was likely a large grizzly. They knew better. In the fifth encounter, the Brooks Range Carcass, 2018. In 2018, a group of hunters in the Brooks Range found a partially eaten moose carcass. At first glance, it looked like a bear kill, but the details didn't match. The spine had been crushed, not torn, not twisted, crushed with a simple bite. Bite radius was wider than any known bear species, wider than a polar bear and wider than a Kodiak. The hunters photographed the carcass and reported it. Wildlife officials arrived, examined the site, and closed the area for 2 weeks. No explanation was given. One of the hunters later said, "Whatever killed that moose wasn't something that was supposed to be here."
Well, like I said, incredible bite force.
Yep. Basically, like I said, and I hadn't read that before, chasing something you want to bite, you want to end the fight quick, crush the spine, and that pretty much ends it.
That pretty much ends it. That ain't going to go very far running with just his front legs. Or no legs if it got the neck.
Yeah.
And I put a lot of stock in what those pilots see, because they're flying over areas that people may have never actually even been.
Well, and let's address the elephant or the bear in the room, so to speak. They said it actually stood up and ran on two legs. Now we've seen bears kind of lumber and walk, but actually running on two legs, that's kind of unusual. I've never heard of any bear.
Well, if it can run on two legs, that kind of lends a lot of credence to the Gugway theory. What if it's just a short-faced bear that spends a lot of time on its hind legs?
It's possible, but there again, like you said, why we have sightings of things bigger? Most of the times we hear about Gugway sightings, they're like 8 to 10 feet.
True. I guess it could be a small one, but you're also seeing them in areas where you don't really see a lot of bears, which I guess could make sense. I mean, there's no bear population.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But we are talking about an area that the terrain itself is designed to hide animals. And you get up there in those parts of the Yukon Territory and the Northwest Territories in Alaska, that there's a reason why people, like even entire aircraft, have crashed and never been found. Because it's just so freaking dense. Once that plane is down below the canopy, you may never find it.
Yeah. And how many of these little planes that crash don't have the little black box or locator beacons or things like that? Or a pilot was killed on impact and never got a chance to turn a locator beacon on.
Right. But, when they talk about the size of some of those sightings, that really kind of lines up with a short-faced bear. It's too big to be a grizzly. It's definitely not behaving like a polar bear. It's too big to be a polar bear. It's got to be either an unknown species of bear or there's got to be a relic population.
And, let's talk about the officials. It's always, that was just an unusually large grizzly.
Right.
Or
well, it's easier to say that than to admit there's something out there they don't want us to know. I mean, if there was a relic population and they admitted it, it would affect everything from hunting to logging to camping and fishing. I mean, that would be off-limits territory for a relic population of limited amounts of a bear that would be not only beyond endangered, but the last pocket of population available anywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
Once it covered pretty much all of the Americas.
And you'd have everybody.
Some people would never go out there again, then there'd be other idiots want to hunt one.
Mm-hmm.
That could end badly.
Somebody won't have one of them, just like that picture you showed a minute ago.
Stuffed and mounted. Yeah, not me. No, thank you. I'm not a big fan of the idea of hunting something that's hunting me back. Miss Lene says, Gugway scare the tar out of me. A 12-foot tall Gugway is so much worse. I can see that. Just Ryan says, spent a lot of my childhood at the La Brea Tar Pits Museum. It seems SFB shared the range with saber-toothed cats. What are the odds there could be a long-haired saber-toothed cats in the tundra? Funny you should say that. We've actually done a show on that before. There very well could be remnant smilodons.
Oh, there's still to this day in places like Chad and Jordan and a lot of remote areas of that part of the world where people report seeing all kinds of saber-toothed cats still. And I if I'm not mistaken, I think a lot of the places where they have been pulling those mammoth remains in Siberia, maybe. I think there's been some sightings of manipulator, which
was the big one, the granddaddy of them all.
Yeah.
Well, they were even saying that they believed that woolly mammoths existed on a remote Russian island up until like the 1950s.
Well, they said that there's people from that area that say that they still, and I can't remember the guy's name, but I watched a documentary and he went on, I guess it was an expedition that they put up there, But he was talking to some of these Russian with Inuits. Is that what they? I think the mix of the Russian and Eskimo population that live right out there in around the steppes and places like that.
I used to know what the actual term was for the indigenous populations in Siberia, but I can't remember.
Anyway, he goes into one of their little markets, and there were people actually selling what they said was fresh mammoth meat off a kill that some of their hunters had just made, days before that. And this was only a couple of years ago that I saw this documentary. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I wish I remembered the name of it.
Well, there was a guy in Alaska that was paying top dollar for people bringing in fossilized mammoth tusks. And there were local tribesmen were bringing in all these ones they would dig up, and they were bringing in old, cracked, yellowed ones that had been in the ground forever. And then one day a dude comes walking in with a brand new one, crisp and clean and ivory. He's like, "Where did you get that?" He goes, "Off a kill." And this was in Alaska, and I think this was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly when that happened, but the dude was absolutely beside himself. They brought in, fresh ivory off a mammoth.
Yeah, it ain't like there's a lot of elephants running around out there that they could have swiped one off of.
Yeah, they're not really popular, not really common in Alaska. Elephants, that is.
Yeah. Except the extremely hairy ones.
Exactly. You want to take us into the next segment?
Sightings are one thing. Evidence is another. And when you start looking at the physical signs left behind, the tracks, the kills, the bite marks, the picture becomes even harder to ignore. Because something out there is leaving evidence that doesn't match any modern bear. And the next segment takes us into the evidence. DA, take it away.
Evidence and expert theories kind of vary widely. But at one point they came across a bite mark that should not exist. Back in 2015, a wildlife officer in the Yukon, a man with more than 20 years field experience, received a report of a moose carcass found near a remote trap line. The caller said it looked like a bear kill, but something about it wasn't right. So the officer snowmobiled out to the site early the next morning. The temperature was well below zero and the air was still and cold. The snow was clean and undisturbed except for the trail leading to the carcass. He expected wolves. He expected a large grizzly. He expected all the usual signs, tearing, claw marks, scattered bones. But what he found stopped him cold. This moose had been killed with a single bite to the spine. Not torn, not chewed, not clawed, crushed. The vertebrae were snapped clean through, as if something with enormous jaw strength had bitten down once and ended it instantly. He knelt beside the carcass, measuring the bite radius. He measured it again, and a third time. It was wider than any modern bear species, wider than a polar bear, wider than a Kodiak. Then he checked the snow around the carcass. There were tracks, but they were distorted by the wind and by drifting. Still, the depth and spacing suggested something very heavy. Very heavy. He photographed everything. The bite, the spine, the tracks, the surrounding area. And when he loaded the photos into a file, he marked it unclassified. When asked later why he didn't submit the report through official channels, he said something that stuck with the people who heard it. He said, "I know what it looks like, and I know what it means, but I'm not opening that door." He wasn't talking about monsters. He wasn't talking about legends. He was talking about the implications. Because if a predator with a bite radius larger than any known bear is killing moose in the Yukon, and then something's out there that shouldn't be. And that wasn't the only piece of evidence. Tracks that don't match any modern bear. Wildlife officers, trappers, and hunters across Alaska and Canada have been documenting for years tracks that don't fit the profile of grizzlies or polar bears. Pads are too wide. Toes are spaced too far apart. Stride lengths way longer than any known species. Track depths indicating extreme weight. Gait patterns consistent with long-legged animals. Most of these reports never make it to public databases. Not because they're hoaxes, but because they don't fit any known species. And agencies like that, they don't like anomalies. Kill patterns that don't match modern predators. Across the north, hunters have found carcasses with crushed vertebrae, massive bite radii, clean, powerful kills without tearing. bones snapped in ways that requires enormous leverage, feeding patterns inconsistent with grizzlies or wolves. These kills aren't messy, they're efficient, they're powerful, the kind of kills you'd expect from a predator built for overwhelming force, a predator like Arctodus simus. Hair samples. This is where we get interesting. Hair samples that don't match known species. Several labs in Alaska and Canada have received hair samples from oversized tracks and unusual kill sites. Most come back as bear species undetermined. Not because they're unknown, but because the samples are degraded or partial or contaminated. But a few have come back with something interesting. Ursidae, no exact match in database. That doesn't mean a new species. It means a sample doesn't match any cataloged bear DNA. And in regions where polar bears and grizzly bears overlap, that's unusual. So why the official agencies stay quiet? This is where the theories come in. Grounded, biological, and realistic. Wildlife agencies avoid acknowledging relic predators for several reasons. Tourist impact. A giant unknown bear species would cause panic in some regions and reckless thrill-seeking in others. Conservation implications. If a relic species exists, it becomes protected immediately, which affects hunting, land use, and resource extraction. Scientific scrutiny. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and agencies don't want to stake their careers on an anomaly. Population viability. A small, isolated population would be extremely vulnerable to human interference. And, lastly, liability. If a relic predator kills someone and the agency knew it existed, the fallout would be enormous. So the safest option for them is just silence. Not denial, not conspiracy, just silence. But when we start looking at the relic population theory, biologists who privately entertain the possibility of Arctodus survival point to several factors. Massive uninhabited land areas. We're talking millions of acres with no roads, no towns, and no human presence. Abundant prey. Moose, caribou, muskox, salmon, enough to sustain a small population. Low human density. Encounters would be rare simply due to a lack of overlap. Behavioral adaptation. Animals that avoid humans survive longer. That's just a fact. Genetic bottleneck tolerance. Some species can survive with surprisingly small populations. Well, we've discovered that, like on the Galapagos Islands. The theory isn't that thousands of short-faced bears have survived. The theory is that a handful did and adapted. A small, stable, elusive population. A relic predator. So what do you think here, Robbie?
Well, if you remember, what was it, 15, 20 years ago, when they first started talking about people had seen the thylacine, you know, nobody ever would say anything except for wanting to call people crazy. Now, fast forward to now, and all the top guys are, you know, Forscalante and the ones like him, they're just like, you know,
almost like every other month a new photo showing up of one.
Yeah. The difference in that and this, I think, is thylacine was still alive when, you know, the last one died in the zoo in, was it 53?
Something like that. I thought it was the 20s, but
maybe
during sometime in the early 20th century.
The old black and white movie reel. So there was actual footage people could see of it. I think that a lot of these things, a lot of the people, you can't, that's not a creature you can deny and say, oh, it's just fantasy, because we have evidence of it from that one in the zoo.
We were both off. Says the last one in captivity died September 7th, 1936.
Okay. So it was in between our guesses.
About halfway.
If the roles were reversed and somebody had one of those in the zoo, would you have the same people saying, oh, that's not possible? Or would it be like, well, It's possible because we know that we know here as us in this channel think we know it's possible for this thing to still be alive, but the general population, people that, you know, not trying to offend anybody, but people like to have their heads in the sand, think, oh no, that couldn't possibly be. Coelacanths died out millions of years ago, although they've hauled several of them up on boats now. Now coelacanth is still, whoops, we got that one wrong.
And they know that for a fact that the people of Madagascar have been eating them for generations.
Yep. Same thing now with the thylacine. Oh, sorry, we got that one wrong.
What else have they got wrong, or just deliberately got wrong?
Exactly. So I think a lot of it, you just answered a lot of that question with some of the things you said at the end of it about the way it would affect industry. Let's just put it that way. Logging, tourism, all that kind of stuff that drives dollars that would kill tourism. And
I think the genetic testing on the hares is kind of telling.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, same with the suspected dogman attacks in Meeker, Colorado, that came back unknown canine species. These are coming back as bear, but no bear they know.
Yeah, that exactly that. I guess my point with this is, if there's irrefutable proof, it's harder for them to make up all the, oh, well, it was just a misidentified grizzly, or it was this, or it was that. Because, you know, if you think back, you know, people with the thylacine, it was at first, it was like, no. Well, then the pictures started showing up. Then all, you know, technology started catching up with the areas these things were in, and people started going in there, you know, and seeing them and talking to these people who were like, oh yeah, we've domesticated some of them things. We got, you know, we bred them with our regular canines and things like, you know, all that stuff. It caught up to it. It was harder and harder to kind of refute it.
Got to do my BBC Animal Planet. Well, if I'm going to do the BBC voice, I have to grab something. Oh no! That couldn't possibly exist! It's the only reason I bought this thing.
Old Jungle Jim.
Just for that voice.
But, so, I think all these creatures, there's really not, and I'm even dinosaurs, because there have been so many people who have seen those things. Mekele Mbembe, Loch Ness Monster. I believe that's, you know, what we would classify as a dinosaur. So many people have seen these things, and it's always like, oh, you don't know what you really saw. Well, how do you know what I saw? You weren't there when I saw it.
Exactly. I've looked people in the eye sometimes and shook my head when they tried to tell me I didn't see what I saw in LBL. Were you there? Because I had a witness and he saw it too.
And but it's so easy for the government to kind of put the squeeze on these people and make them feel like they're the ones who are wrong, and make them feel, you know, unsure of themselves because, hey, look, I know I work for the government. I know what I'm talking about. You don't know what you saw. And it just, you know, it infuriates me that people want to discredit somebody just because they don't
agree with it, or
yeah. Because, I mean, you know as well as I do, that all they got to have to still be a thriving population is land and space, which we know they have. We've proved that.
Food source. They've got that. And shelter. That.
Yeah.
And how many caves and, you know, cuts and you know, deep ravines are in that area? More than we will probably ever know, because it's largely unexplored.
Exactly. So if you would just, and I know this, we're talking about the government, I know they actually probably know that this stuff is there. They just don't want us to know, or want people to know that they know. But when you start looking at it that way, it just opens up so many possibilities for, okay, well, that's out there. What else is still out there? It's just like
that area is so big, a small population could go unnoticed. In fact, that area is so big, a large population could go unnoticed.
It's just like saying things like megalodon or, Leviathan and things like that don't exist. I mean, we've not explored so much area on this planet, woods, water, all that stuff. How can you sit there and say it's not possible when there's so much left of this world that's still undiscovered? We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about what's in the ocean. That right there is enough to make you say, okay, I don't buy anything these experts say about, well, this couldn't exist.
So, exactly. With all that, bearing all of that in mind, folks, bearing all of that in mind with everything we've talked about so far, the next segment we're going to be talking about what does this leave us with? Robbie, you want to go ahead and start the next segment?
Segment 5, the questions we're left with. The Rangers report. In 2021, a park ranger stationed in the Yukon interior responded to a call from a group of backcountry skiers. They had found something unusual, not a kill, not tracks, but a trail. A long, straight, deliberate trail cutting across the valley floor. The ranger snowshoed. I thought that said snowboarded. I was like, ranger snowboard? The ranger snowshoed out to meet them. But the temperatures were brutal, the kind of cold that makes your breath freeze on your scarf and your eyelashes stick together. The sky was a flat gray sheet, heavy with promise of more snow. The skiers led him to the trail. At first glance, it looked like a bear path, but the ranger had been in the field for 15 years, and he knew bear trails. He knew how they wandered and how they curved, how they followed food sources or terrain features. And this one didn't wander. It didn't curve. It didn't follow anything. It cut straight across the valley in a perfect line, a line that only a long-legged. The ranger knelt beside one of the impressions. It wasn't a full track because the wind softened the edges, but the depth was unmistakable. Something heavy had passed through. Something heavy had passed through. Something very heavy. He followed the trail for nearly a mile. The stride length was consistent and the depth was consistent. The direction never changed. Then the trail reached a slope, a steep one, a slope that should have forced any bear to zigzag or slow down. But the trail didn't zigzag. It didn't slow. It went straight up the incline with the same heavy, long strides. The ranger stopped halfway up, breathing hard, and looked at the impressions ahead of him, deep, powerful, and evenly spaced. He later said no bear climbs like that, not in the deep snow, not with that kind of stride. He followed the trail to the top of the ridge, and there, at the crest, the impression stopped, not because the animal turned, but because the snow changed. Not because of snow changed, not because of wind. They just stopped. Beyond the ridge, the snow was untouched. The ranger stood there for a long time trying to make sense of it. He checked the wind pattern. He checked for drifting. He checked for signs of a jump or a fall. Nothing. He took photos and he took measurements and he documented everything. When he returned to the station, he filed the report. The report was flagged, and then it was removed from the public database. Not deleted, just moved. When asked about it later, he said it wasn't a bear. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a bear. He didn't claim it was a short-faced bear, and he didn't claim anything extraordinary. He simply said something big is moving through that valley. Something that doesn't move like anything we have on record. And that's the part that matters. Not the legends, not the stories, not the speculation. The movement, the stride, the weight, the behavior. Something is out there that moves like a long-legged pursuit predator. Something that climbs like a creature built for efficiency, not bulk. Something that leaves trails that don't match any modern species. And something that fits the profile of Arctodus simus. Not perfectly, not conclusively, but close enough to raise the question, What if the Ice Age didn't take all of them?
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I think at least some of them survived. But I still kind of freaks me out about the tracks just stopping. Because surely it couldn't have backtracked down a mountainside.
But to your point about, or what was just said about maybe the Ice Age didn't take them all. There again, that's our, as humans, thinking we know everything. How do we know the Ice Age claimed everything that was there? We were not alive in the Ice Age. We don't know. Like
Nor have we covered every square inch of this planet.
1/10 of 1% of animals in the fossil record of all animals. So we don't even know what animals were. We know the animals are there because of what skeletons we found, but we don't know what else was there. So how do we know that everything in that Ice Age is extinct? Because we don't even know what all was there. So what if this is maybe not a short-faced bear, but what if it's something else that is related to the short-faced bear, but
like a genetic descendant?
Yeah, I mean,
what if the last of the short-faced bears crossbred with grizzlies or polar bears? It could be a species of bear out there. We don't even have any idea that it's there.
We know for a fact that grizzlies and polar bears mate, pizzlies and growlers, depending on which is mom and which is dad.
And science is still finding new species literally every day.
Yeah.
Generally, they're insects, but not always. Every once in a while, we find something big that we never cataloged before.
So
the billy ape comes quickly to mind.
Yep. I just think it's so arrogant for us as humans to say we know that everything that was in the Ice Age is extinct now, because no, we don't know that. I mean, that's like saying, like me saying, I know that there's a rock on the moon that looks like this and this, and it has this character. I've never been to the moon. How do I know that? Or, me saying, I know that there's a megalodon swimming around in the Marianas Trench. How do I know that? Because I've never been there. You can't.
Very few people ever have.
Right. But you can't, there's nothing about what is alive and what is not alive species wise that you can say with any surety. You can speculate, but you can't say it's impossible for a T-Rex to be walking around. You don't know that. Nobody knows that for sure. I mean, there could be a valley, just like Vern wrote about in his books, somewhere that
dinosaurs still exist.
Yeah, that
we just don't know.
And we've talked about that many times. About how did Vern know what a nuclear submarine looked like? How did he know what a submarine looked like and operated like?
And anytime somebody makes an absolute definitive statement like that, 99% of the time they're wrong.
Yep. So I don't know. It's like we said, space, food source. We've already proven they've got that.
I'm right there with you, Miss Lene. I do believe that there are loads of species yet to be cataloged, that both on land, air, and sea, and subterranean. God knows what we're going to find, because we have, as far as speleology goes, we've not even scratched the surface of the Earth, because we're just incapable of going that deep, at least with current technology levels. But God knows what's down there in the deep Earth.
Yep, growlers were considered a cryptid until they figured out, and pizzlies too. I mean,
well, you remember that old boy in Alaska shot one and thought, "Oh crap, I'm going to prison. I shot a polar bear." And he called in conservation. He's like, "This is a polar bear. I'm sorry, I shot it. I thought it was a grizzly." And they're like, "It ain't either one." He ended up not getting in any trouble, but he's like, "I thought it was a grizzly, and when I got up to it, it had white fur mixed in with it." He said, "Did I just kill a polar bear?" And they were like, "Nope, this is not a grizzly or a polar bear. It's a mix." Northwoods is thinking them tonight. Robin Ray says some entities, well, I'll just put the comment up. Some entities and people go to extreme measures to maintain their control over information. You ain't wrong.
Nope.
Don Donaldson says, are grizzly bears or polar bears that were subspecies of the short-faced bear? Couldn't it be that one in a mill, but it's a throwback? Hey, that's entirely possible. A genetic throwback.
Well, Kodiaks, grizzlies, and polar bears are all in the same genus. They're all that. That's why grizzlies and polar bears and Kodiaks can mate and have offspring. Like,
so I imagine short-faced bear would probably be in that same genus.
Yeah, it's in the same genus, I believe.
So even if there are only a handful of them, the feasibility of them having the food sources, the terrain, the range, the feasibility of them being able to have survived is 100% believable. Whatever side of the argument you want to come down on, whether or not you believe the short-faced bear still exists or they don't, there is plenty of terrain, plenty of places for them to hide, and plenty of food that could have sustained them. And in those extreme northern territories, like the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and in parts of Alaska, it is so remote and rugged that it may have never seen a person.
I bet you if we dug into the prospectors' stories from the Yukon and things like that, I just about bet you there would be stories.
Well, a couple of those stories were from prospectors.
Yeah, but I'm talking about if we just did a deep dive into that, how many more of those stories would we find?
Yeah, I totally agree. So, you want to lead us into segment 6?
Yep. So everything we've covered so far, the tracks, the stride length, kill patterns, the trails that move in straight lines across deep snow, all of it points towards a predator that doesn't match any modern species. But before we jump into conclusions, there's one more piece of the puzzle that we need to look at. A piece that doesn't come from a story or a sighting or a set of tracks. It comes from a physical specimen, a real skull, a real hide, collected, examined, and archived by the Smithsonian.
Oh, here we go. The Smithsonian.
Yeah, here we go. Because in 1864, long before modern wildlife science, long before GPS collars and trail cams, hunters in the Canadian Arctic killed a bear that didn't match anything on record. A bear so unusual that the Smithsonian had to give it its own classification. A bear they called Ursus
Inoptinus.
Inoptinatus.
The unexpected bear.
Yeah, the unexpected bear. And when you look at the specimen, when you compare its proportions, its detention, and its skull structure, you start to realize something important. The North has produced an outlier, or the North produced outlier bears before, documented ones, measured ones, ones that didn't fit the book. So before we talk about the relic predators, we need to talk about the bear that proved the North is capable of surprises. This is the story of McFarlane's bear.
So the story is, the McFarlane's bear produced a skull that didn't belong to anything they'd ever cataloged. Back in 1864, the Anderson River region of Canada was a place very few outsiders ever reached. A frozen, wind-carved wilderness where winter ruled most of the year, and the land demanded respect from anyone who crossed it. That year, Inuit hunters brought down a massive bear. Not unusual, the region held both polar and grizzlies. But this one was different. The proportions were off. The skull shape was unfamiliar, and the teeth didn't match any of the bears they knew. They preserved the hide and the skull and passed them to a Hudson's Bay Company naturalist named Robert McFarlane. Robert McFarlane immediately recognized that something was wrong, or rather, something didn't fit. So, he sent the specimen to the Smithsonian Institution. Months later, zoologists at the Smithsonian examined it and realized that they had a problem. The skull didn't match a polar bear. It didn't match a grizzly. It didn't match any known hybrid. The proportions were wrong, the teeth were wrong, and the size was extreme. They cataloged it as a new species, Ursus inoptinatus, the unexpected bear. It was the only specimen of its kind ever recorded. And then it quietly got archived. Not hidden, not dismissed, just placed on a shelf somewhere because they didn't have a category for it. That sounds real familiar.
Mm-hmm.
The features that didn't add up were interesting, though. When researchers revisited the specimen decades later, they noted several unusual traits. A shorter, broader muzzle than a polar bear. What does that sound like?
Mm-hmm.
A wider zygomatic arch, the arch across the eyes, wider zygomatic arch than the grizzly. Teeth inconsistent with either species. A cranial shape closer to prehistoric bears than to modern bears. And a size that exceeded all known modern specimens. Some suggest it was a hybrid, but the skull didn't match any known hybrid morphology. Some suggested just a freak individual, but the proportions were too consistent. Some suggested a relic lineage, a descendant of an older bear species that survived longer than expected. But no one could prove it, and no one could disprove it. And that's what makes McFarlane's bear so important, because it proves something critical. The North has produced bears that don't match any known species before. Not legends, not blurry photos, not anecdotal sightings, physical specimens, examined, measured, cataloged, and stored. A real animal that didn't fit the taxonomy of its time. If it happened once, it can definitely happen again. McFarlane's bear is the biological bridge between modern bears, prehistoric bears, and the possibility of relic megafauna. It shows that extinction is not a clean line. It's a theory, a best guess, and sometimes the land proves that guess wrong. The relic theory really is interesting here. Biologists who study this specimen today point out that its skull shape resembles the Arctodus more than modern bears. The dentition suggests bone-crushing diet. Again, not like modern bears. Its size indicates extreme strength. Its proportions don't match any known modern bear. And its existence implies survival of unknown lineages well into the 19th century. If a bear like that existed in 1864, what else could have survived? What else could still be out there? McFarlane's bear proves that the short-faced bear survived. I think it does. But it proves the North is capable of producing and hiding bears that don't fit the modern world. And that's the whole point of this episode. So, Robbie, what do you think? I think it's unusual that this specimen never really got talked about publicly a lot once it got in the hands of the Smithsonian.
Yeah. So there, and I want to say I saw it, that it's still on YouTube, but there's a documentary called McFarlane's Bear, and of course it's surgically handled, and they start out saying that they thought it was a short-faced bear, and of course that it's basically, I can't remember what they classified it as, but they basically said no, that it was just while it was extremely high on the outlier side of size and all stuff. Basically, they wrote it up to being some type of hybrid, but it's all too clean and wrapped up in with a nice little bow to. Well,
of course, those documentaries always end with a nice little bow.
Yeah.
Oh, no, this was just a one-off. That was it.
Yep. And that's pretty much how they wrapped it up to be. But it's also a pretty good documentary because you get to see a lot of the old photos and you get a good idea of the land and how it was back then. And if you really just kind of drown out what they're saying and don't listen to their stupidity, it really paints a good picture of the fact that this is a distinct possibility that's probably what it was.
Oh, absolutely. So I really think that McFarlane's bear was an actual short-faced bear. The shape of the skull, the proportions, I think they actually brought down a short-faced bear in an area where people don't normally go.
But you know what? I don't think it was an adult. I think it was a juvenile.
Well, yeah, it was big, but I don't think it was massive proportions.
It was bigger than any polar bear or grizzly, but I don't think for short-faced bear standards it was small. So I think they brought down a juvenile. But,
so if one exists, possibility of, and granted, this was 1864. We're talking during the Civil War, So, but if one of them existed then, why wouldn't it now? I mean, what has really changed since then? Even that area hasn't really changed.
So out there, nothing's really changed.
Of people with rarely deep woods Inuit hunters.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Times are modern, but that people that's out there is not really. I mean, yeah, they've got some modern snowmobiles maybe now and more modern weaponry, but
they still live kind of like the way they did 100 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, they may have some more amenities now than they did back then, but not sufficient. Here's the thing: to drive something like that or drive a population like that into extinction, what does it usually take?
Massive overhunting.
Us dummies going in there. Hey, we're going to live here. We're going to cut everything down. We're going to build house. And that's not there. It doesn't happen there. So
that's what happened with grizzlies in Missouri. We used to have Midwest grizzlies. There were grizzlies here in Missouri when the settlers first came west. But by 1865, they'd killed the last of them off. Same with the elk and the wood bison.
Yep. So, taking into consideration that land really has not changed since then, I'd say it's very possible you still had a population running around up there.
Thank you, Stone Willow. I always thought the zygomatic arch was up here. I guess it's right here, the side. I always thought it was like the arch of bone above your eye. Because I always thought it was because I'm missing a chunk of bone out of this one. A youthful transgression involving a tire tool. I won't go into a lot of detail on. But I'm missing a chunk of bone in my skull from getting it busted out right there. Still got a scar. Got 7 minutes till ad time, so.
Well, that was the segue to the outro, so.
Yeah, well, by the time we do the outro and talk about our affiliates, I don't want to run too terribly late because Robbie's got to get up early in the morning to travel. So we will we'll probably take a short break, come back and talk and close out the show. But instead of closing it out with all of our affiliates, I've been posting the links all throughout the show. In fact, we can just say that right now. Check out the good folks over at Dark Angel Medical. Check out the folks at SigwellArms.com. Folks at Scallywag Tactical. Periodically you'll be seeing those links pop up in the chat. All of the discount codes are available with those links. So check those guys out and make sure you're checking out all of Robbie's books, all of Doc's books, and Luca's books, as well as my books, which can all be found at Amazon.com. Lucas can be found at lucatjacobs.com, and mine can be found at daroberts.net. But you can find all of them on Amazon in Kindle, print, and audio. Having covered all that, when we wrap up from the break, we'll close it out and we'll do our toast, and we'll end the show there instead of trying to fill a third hour because we certainly don't have the material. But I also want to make sure we're done before. Well, it'd be 10:30 your time, so Robbie can get plenty of sleep. So we're gonna pause for a commercial here in just a few minutes, and then we'll come back and wrap up the show. So here, just for sake of argument, McFarlane's bear, do you think it could have been a genetic throwback?
I mean, it's possible. I think it probably was a short-faced bear. I mean, it's got, like I said, I just think it was a younger one, a younger specimen, but it's got everything that they described And even if you watch that documentary, when they show all that stuff, I mean, that's what it looks like. It doesn't look.
Yeah.
And even the skeptics or the ones that want you to believe it was not, the things they were saying about it line up with the short-faced bear.
Exactly. The skull structure, the size, the proportions. It's more like a short-faced bear than any current living bear.
I mean, the simple fact that, okay, if they want to say it's a hybrid, okay, fine and dandy, it's a hybrid. But how do you explain the teeth? Because even if it's a hybrid, it's still going to have a tooth structure.
The teeth structure of modern bears.
And the fact that its tooth structure didn't match either one of those, you can't have it be a hybrid and have it have something completely different from.
It's going to have characteristics of its parents.
Yeah, I mean
because modern bears' teeth are designed for grabbing and tearing flesh. They're not designed for crushing bone.
Because that's what a hybrid is. It's a mix, not its own thing. So if it's got things that are its own thing that doesn't belong to either of those two, then it's its own thing.
If you took a DNA sample from a tiger or a liger, it's going to come back as the parents being a tiger and a lion.
Mm-hmm. Because
it's not going to come up with something entirely new.
Yeah, it may look different. It may be bigger or smaller depending on which. A tigon is the smaller, and a liger gets the gigantism or whatever they call it. Mm-hmm. It gets that. That's why it gets so big. But it still has traits from both species. It is a hybrid of those two species, but it has traits from those. So yes, I guess technically it's its own thing because it's tiger or tigon or a liger, but it still inherently has traits from both mixed into one. It doesn't have something that is completely specific to itself that it didn't get from mom and dad. It doesn't morph into its own or have its own teeth characteristics or bone structure or any of that kind of stuff. It's still based on what it can, because it doesn't work that way. And they think we're stupid because they say this, and that people can't figure this stuff out because, I went to school for 20 years. I know what I'm talking about.
Lone Queen's got a good point. Says the natives that killed it didn't recognize it. That points it to being short-faced to me. They should have been able to figure out a hybrid of known bears. I would agree.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, just look at a mule and a donkey. I mean, just look at a mule. A mule is a hybrid from a horse and a donkey. It still has characteristics of both.
Yep. And that's a known. Those are both known animals. So a hybrid would produce something with qualities of the known parents. Mm-hmm. But for that skull and that for McFarlane's bear to produce an animal that had no recognizable modern traits, the hybrid theory becomes far and far less likely. Well, anyway, we are just about to take a quick break. Folks, if this would be a great opportunity if you want to step away from the computer for a minute, top off your coffee, stretch your legs, walk the dog, put the laundry away, restart the dryer, whatever you got to do. We will be back in just a couple of minutes.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com. 2026 is off to a great start, and it's almost time. With many exciting predictions and the recent emphasis on a potential major planetary event occurring in April, it promises to be a super transformational month, and we couldn't be more excited to be in Hawaii during this shift to integrate new frequencies. Folks, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. April the 20th through the 24th, 2026, join us in Kona, Hawaii for Journey to Truth's very first vacation conference retreat. Enjoy 9 presenters over 5 days with ocean adventures with dolphins and whales and sacred sites and so much more. Experience Hawaii like never before. You will enjoy 5 days on the Big Island, so don't wait. Start planning your trip today at journeytotruth.online. That's journeytotruth.online. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man, from the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the Dead Rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and Man's Marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of D.A. Roberts.
And folks, we are back. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We've covered a lot of interesting territory tonight, and to kind of conclude this, McFarlane's bear is more than just a curiosity. It's a reminder that the North has teeth and secrets. And if one unknown bear walked those frozen rivers in 1864, then the idea of a relic predator surviving in the modern era isn't fantasy. It's an entire possibility. That giants may still walk that area. The North has a way of holding on to its secrets. It's a place shaped by ice and wind and silence, a place where the land is so vast, so empty, so untouched that even today there are valleys where no one has ever stepped into them, ridges where no one has ever climbed, canyons where the sun barely reaches the ground. And in those places, the past doesn't feel distant. It feels close, it feels present, and it feels alive. Tonight we walk through the evidence. Not legends, not folklore, not tall tales told around a campfire. Evidence. Tracks that don't match any modern bear. Stride lengths too long for grizzlies. Kill patterns that show crushing force instead of tearing. Bite radii wider than any known species. Hair samples that don't match catalog DNA. Trails that move straight efficient lines across terrain that forces modern bears to zigzag. And the sightings. Credible sightings from pilots, trappers, hunters, rangers, and biologists. People who know the land, people who know the animals, and people who don't scare easily or exaggerate. None of these things on their own prove anything, but together they do form a pattern. And a pattern that points to a possibility that most scientists won't touch. Not because it's impossible, but because it's inconvenient. Because if a relative predator population survived the Ice Age, if a handful of short-faced bears adapted, endured, and learned to avoid us, then everything we think we know about extinction, about wilderness, and about the boundaries of the modern world, it shifts. And maybe that's why these stories linger. Not because people want monsters, but because the land itself feels big enough, wild enough, old enough to hide something we thought was gone. Think about the places we talked about tonight. The Brooks Range, the Yukon interior, the Nahanni Valley, Kodiak's deep timber, Windfall Lake. These aren't parks with paved trails. These aren't forests with campgrounds every few miles. These are regions where you can travel for days without seeing another human being. Where storms erase tracks in minutes. Where rivers shift their paths every season. And where an animal could live and die, leaving almost nothing behind. And if a predator like Arctodus simus survived anywhere, it would be there. Not in the open, not in the spotlight, but in the margins, in the deep valleys, in the shadowed timber, in the places where the land itself still belongs to itself. So we're left with the question, not is the short-faced bear alive? Science doesn't work in absolutes like that, but neither does the wilderness. The real question is a lot simpler, more grounded, more honest. Could it be alive? Could a relic predator survive in the last true wilderness on the continent? Could it adapt? Could it avoid us? Could it leave just enough evidence to raise eyebrows, but not enough to force a conclusion? When you look at the land, when you look at the biology, when you look at the sightings, the answer isn't comforting. Because the answer is yes, it could. And if it could, then maybe it did. Maybe somewhere out there in the deep cold of the north, a long-legged giant still walks. A predator built for distance, built for power, built for survival. A survivor of the Ice Age, a shadow of the past, a reminder that extinction is not a moment, it's a theory. And theories can be wrong. So if you've enjoyed this episode, into the cold of the night with us, do us a favor, like the episode. Share it with someone who loves the deep wilderness, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to show support directly for the channel, consider becoming a channel member. It helps us keep the research going, keep the stories coming, and keep the hunt alive. This has been episode 410. This has been Terror on the Tundra, and we are the Nightmare Hunters. Stay cautious, stay safe, and keep your eyes on the tree line. So before we close her out tonight, we've been closing out with a toast. And I also want to remind folks one more time to keep the folks we mentioned before in their prayers. Miss Lene, Harold, I had them written down. What did I do with the document? Harold Goodell, Miss Lene, Doc and Robbie as they travel, and all the folks over at the Woodwalkers, and anybody else in the audience tonight that needs it. And if you can, reach out and help a veteran in distress. His PayPal link is right there. It would be very much appreciated. Again, I won't say his name, but he knows. Hey, I'm sure he's listening, and he knows that we care. So with that in mind, folks, we are going to close her out with a toast. And let me bring the toast up. And Robbie, do you mind giving us the toast tonight?
Raise a glass with us. Doesn't matter what you're drinking. From the old Irish drinking song, Parting Glass. It goes like this. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Good night, everybody.
Plains, the winds are howling, saloon doors swinging, shadows growling. 3 lawmen stand tough as rawhide. Yeah, Doc and DA, nothing can abide. Whiskey shots and poker faces, staring down the darkest spaces in this town where legends roam. These boys bring justice, sending evil home. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free. against the endless night. Jed's a howler, claws of steel, Doc's a biter, makes the devil real. But DA's a shifty one, a shape-shifting soul, can turn to anything, takes any form, takes control. Tonight the chupacabras come to town, sucking the life from all around. But these lawmen, they ain't afraid, they'll face the darkness unafraid. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rain. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Bat wings flap, the air grows cold, a chill and trap. But these lawmen, they're ready to fight underneath the pale moonlight. Jed and Doc transform with a howl, DA shifts, becomes a night owl. Together they stand, a force so strong against the evil right in the road. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night.